Our first unit this year, after the introductory session, is going to focus on the program Scratch. When you get into Scratch, and we'll explain how you'll do that, this is what you will see. The area right here, where we see this cat, the square containing that cat, is called the stage. And that is what you will see when you actually run the program. Now I can set the stage like this, so this will show you more clearly what the program will look like when it starts to run. This area right here is the scripts area, and this contains all the blocks that are the commands that we use in Scratch to animate the sprite or sprites, because we can have more than one, and it has a whole bunch of different areas, and we'll come back to that. Right now it's set to motion, so all of these commands involve moving the sprite around the screen. This area over here is the paint area, and this is where you will modify your sprites. If you want to, for example, create your own sprite and edit it, all that will take place here. In addition to the sprites, we also have what's called the stage. The stage is the background on which the sprite moves. So for example, right now the stage is just a blank screen. Well, one of the things that we can do is we could go to backdrops, which are different looks for the stage, and we can create a new backdrop. We will look at that more later. So right now, let's take a look at how we would actually do something with this sprite. So we'll click on the sprite. We'll click on motion. Right now you can see the sprite is selected. So that means that any of the commands that you drag into this area here will act on that sprite. So for example, let's say we want the sprite to move 50 steps. Okay, when we click on this now, the sprite moves 50 steps. If we want the sprite to move 50 steps and then turn 90 degrees, we would take this command and we would link them together. We'll move the sprite back to give it a little more room, and now when we click, it moves 50 steps, turns 90 degrees, does it again, etc. So you can see here there are all kinds of commands for changing the direction that the sprite is pointing, which is this command right here, where the direction that it moves, the way it turns. This also is a grid, and each position on this has a set of X and Y coordinates. So for example, down here, all the way at the bottom right-hand corner, we have an X coordinate of 240 and a Y coordinate of negative 180. All the way up at the top left corner, we have an X value of negative 240 and a Y value of positive 180. So we can control the position of the sprite by these commands. Go to, let's say we wanted to go to 0, 0, we would just type that in, and when we click that, the sprite will move to the center of the stage. You can also tell the sprite to change its X or its Y value by a given amount. And that'll be important when you're animating your sprite, and especially when it's going to react to certain kinds of changes. You can also have change the way what happens when it hits the wall. You can have it bounce off the wall, or you could have it do other sorts of things. Okay, looks control things like if you want the sprite to say something, you would use this. So let's say we would say have the sprite say hello for 2 seconds. It now, when we click that, it says hello for 2 seconds. We have a number of other things here. We can change what's called the costume of the sprite. You can see when the sprite is selected, if we click on costumes, we'll see that this particular sprite has 2 different costumes. And so you could, for example, have a program change back and forth between these two, and if the sprite were moving forward, it would look as though the sprite was doing a kind of a walking action. You can add new costumes, you can edit costumes. You can see that when I clicked on this, it automatically pulled this into the paint area here, where if I chose to, I could, for example, click on this and I could make this costume larger. And so now when I go back and forth, you can see the size is changing. Okay, back at the script. So just quickly, what else we have here? So Scratch has all kinds of sound features. You can play sounds that either are part of a library or that you create. You can also change the volume of a sound. You can have it change the tempo. You can pick particular musical instruments to have it play. So there's a lot of features there that you'll want to take advantage of when you create your animations. The pen is, if we put, well, before I do that, let me clear all these away. And so to erase any of these scripts, I just drag them back here and they disappear. So let's say we want the sprite now actually to draw a line when it moves. So let's say we'll have it move again 50 steps. But this time we want to have it draw a line. Well, we click on pen, we do pen down, and link those together. And then we'll have it pull the pen back up so it would stop drawing. So now when I click on this, when the sprite moves, it's going to actually draw a line, which you can see. And then I could have it draw a square by turning. I could have it draw all kinds of things. The other thing is, if I don't want the sprite to appear, when I click here, I can make the sprite disappear so that as I move the sprite, all you'll see is the line. Okay, also we have here data, which we'll be using to create variables. We'll get back to that more. Events will be important. So for example, when I want everything to start based on when I click this green flag, then I drag this element and I connect everything to that. So now the action starts as soon as I click the green flag. We could also have the action motivated by pressing a space bar or some other key. We could have it motivated when the sprite itself is clicked. So there's a number of ways that we can create events that will initiate sequences of program activities. Control has to do with setting conditions under which things happen. So I can use if-else type statements. I can also have it repeat actions 10 times. So for example, suppose that we wanted to repeat this action 5 times. We take this whole set of steps, we put it inside this loop, and now when I click this, it actually repeated this sequence of steps 5 times. And that obviously is going to be very important so that you don't have to keep putting in code. You can actually just tell it to repeat certain pieces of code. Sensing, we'll get back to. Operators is where you have your mathematical operations, and we'll come back to that. And then other blocks, we'll get back to that as well.